The Pontiac Grand Prix entered the automotive scene in 1962, but it wasn't really until the 1969 Pontiac Grand Prix was introduced that the model took off in terms of sales and became known as Pontiac's iconic personal luxury coupe. In 1971, the Grand Prix styling was revised to give it a bit of a boat tail rear, a signature that General Motors styling VP Bill Mitchell certainly enjoyed, as exemplified by the 1971 to 73 Riviera. This boat tail theme made its way onto a number of vehicles aside from the Grand Prix, including vehicles like the Cadillac Eldorado, although the boat tails on these vehicles were admittedly more muted in form. For 1977, the Grand Prix was coming to the end of the run in terms of being the last of the large, big Grand Prix. This body style ran from 1973 through 1977, and a number of changes were made for its final year in terms of styling and overall finishings. This particular 1977 Grand Prix is finished in a beautiful color called Mandarin Orange. It has a black top and black interior, which we'll discuss in a second. But let's first look at some of the styling differences that are quite notable for this 1977 Grand Prix versus the 1976 model. The first is that the turn signals have been moved from being outboard of the headlights to now being inboard of the headlight and outboard of the bright headlight, just kind of stuck in the middle there. The second major change that one notices is that the grille is quite different. First, the texture is very different versus the 1976 model, which had very thin vertical blades. For 1977, the grille texture was revised to have this sort of theme within a theme, rectangles within rectangles, which is quite a handsome overall treatment and very different from the previous years. The last feature about the grille is that it now has some elements that dip below that rub strip in the bumper and provide additional air inflow. There were also some changes made out back, most notably to the taillights, which no longer had the rib theme and now were cleaner with the Grand Prix logo in the middle of them. You can note here that so-called boat tail shape that I was previously mentioning that began on the Grand Prix with the 1971 model year and continued on to the 1977 model year. The 1978 model, when it was introduced, would eschew that theme completely. From the side here, you can see that that boat tail theme complemented a body side that had this wonderful fender form that evolved into the door and then kicked up near the rear window. This does have, as I mentioned, a vinyl roof. On these Grand Prix like this one, they did have a half vinyl roof. This one is an SJ version, which was the sportier version, and it had a number of interesting features and unique interior that gave it that feel. Also note the famous Pontiac Rally 2 wheels in this particular photo that distinctly set off this vehicle from others on the road. Turning to the inside, you can see this particular vehicle has these beautiful black velour buckets, and it also has the optional custom sport steering wheel, which was a 3-spoke design. The standard steering wheel was also a 3-spoker, but just not as elegant as this one. This particular vehicle is also equipped with a center console that has this nice light that illuminates the passenger side footwell underneath it. It's a little bit hard to see in this picture of this particular car what the overall interior theme is, so I'll insert here a picture of another 1977 Pontiac SJ Grand Prix interior now. And here you can see the interior in another 1977 Pontiac SJ with bucket seats. This one does have the standard 3-spoke steering wheel versus the custom sport steering wheel. And you also notice the driver-centric cockpit in these vehicles, which was pioneered with the 1969 Grand Prix introduction. Prior to that vehicle, there really weren't any domestic cars that had such a driver-centric cockpit. But with the introduction of the 1969 Grand Prix, it became a styling theme for the vehicle that customers really liked. Even the console, notice, is tilted toward the driver. And of course, it wouldn't be a Pontiac if it didn't have the grab handle on the passenger side. That had become a feature of Pontiacs for quite some time, and humorously, even the 1971 Granville had a grab handle for passengers, although it wasn't on the dash. It was up in the upper pillar trim on the 4-door hardtops. Here's another shot of another 1977 Pontiac Grand Prix interior. This one has a bench seat. It does have the passenger mirror control, which you can see over there on the right side of the driver's instrument panel area. And it does have automatic climate control. You can see the automatic temperature sensor in the top of the instrument panel pad poking out there. It does have the optional, can you spot it, litter container as well in the kickwell on the passenger side floor. This one does have a clock. It does have the gauge package, but overall, again, a very luxurious interior with lots of velour and deep pile carpeting. Now, under hood in these vehicles, there was a bit of a disappointment versus the 1976 model year, and that was that the top engine, the 455 cubic inch V8 from 1976, had been dropped. Although by that point, the Pontiac 455 was only making 200 horsepower. It really wasn't producing very much more than the 400 cubic inch V8, which made 185 horsepower in 1976 and 180 horsepower in 1977 in these Grand Prix. So not too much of a difference. That was in part due to the 455 having a different quadrajet carburetor with smaller secondaries. You could see how they were scalloped out here versus the regular quadrajets. I believe that was only true for Pontiac V8s and only in the 1975 and 76 model years, likely done for emissions reasons. But otherwise, I can't think of a reason why Pontiac would do that. So for 1977, the standard Grand Prix engine was Pontiac's 301 cubic inch V8, which had just been introduced in 1977, outfitted with a two-barrel carburetor, making all of 135 horsepower. Really not that much. And this had the Rochester dual jet, kind of half of a quadrajet on top of it. And in 1977, the first year of the 301, there were some spark knock issues with that engine. And so it really was not great. It took another year to really revise that out of the engine due to the combustion chamber shape. But optional from the 301 and one up from that was a 350 cubic inch V8 making 170 horsepower. And then one up from that was Pontiac's 400 cubic inch V8 making 180 horsepower in this particular application. This was the same V8 that was used in the manual transmission Firebirds. Humorously enough, if you got an automatic transmission Firebird, you got the Olds 403 cubic inch V8. Yes, an Oldsmobile engine in the Firebird, which made 185 horsepower. And you also got some different lettering on the hood scoop on the Firebirds, depending on which engine you got. But that's an entirely different story for a different day. Regardless, this 400 wasn't a bad engine in these Pontiacs, but they were quite porky. This 1977 Grand Prix SJ weighed in at almost 4,000 pounds, and it was a big car with a wheelbase of 116 inches. It was an intermediate-sized vehicle, but it measured about 212 inches in overall length. By comparison, the next year's Grand Prix, the 1978, would be downsized to a 108-inch wheelbase and would also lose about a foot in length. It would also lose about 700 pounds in weight. So this 1977 Grand Prix is really the last of the big Grand Prix, if you will, and certainly has a lot of Pontiac style. You can see the arrowhead theme in the front, and it's done very tastefully. I think these 1977s are just great-looking vehicles inside and out, and the buying public must have agreed because Pontiac sold 288,000 of them in 1977. With the 1978's introduction, Grand Prix sales would slow a bit, down to 225,000 or so. So it's also interesting that the best sales year for this generation Grand Prix was the 1977 model year, where it sold 288,000 units. Overall, about 860,000 Grand Prix were sold from 1973 to 1977, making it an extremely popular vehicle and certainly one of the great cars in Pontiac history, and I think it's one of the best looking cars, particularly of the mid and late 1970s. Hope you enjoyed this spotlight on this particular Mandarin Orange Grand Prix and on the 1977 Grand Prix in general. If you did, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and check out the video thumbnails at bottom left and right for some suggestions for you.